Hey, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in to episode 30 of the Fourth String Sports Podcast. I am your host, Brady, with my co-hosts, Mitch and Skylar. How are we doing on this fine Saturday morning, gentlemen?
Fuck Memphis.
It's a little early, bud.
Fuck Memphis. Yes, the reason that we're fucking Memphis is because they clinched the play-in spot. Portland clinched the 8th seed in the NBA. We're going to break down the remaining NBA first-round playoff matchups. We already talked about Bucks, Magic, and Raptors, Nets on the last episode, as they were the only ones that were for sure. But we'll break down the other two matchups in the East. We'll break down the 8 in the West, including some updates with that possible Rockets-Thunder matchup. We're also going to break down the updated college football polls we talked about in our last episode. We talked about the Big Ten and the Pac-12 not being playing football this year, so we're going to break down the most updated one. It's not official, but this is a pretty good approximation. And then we've got our What's list, where we're breaking down the top 5 college football rivalries. We've got our Hero and Putt segment, and then we're also breaking down the San Francisco 49ers today. We've got 4 teams left: Seattle, Tampa, Tennessee, and Washington. Should have some really interesting teams coming up here. And then after that will be a couple of days before the college football season is supposed to start and the NFL season is supposed to start. We'll be right in the middle of the NBA playoffs. So we got some great episodes coming up, you guys. I appreciate everybody for listening and following on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, Spotify, SoundCloud, and emailing us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com. We appreciate everything. Email us, like us, follow us, subscribe, tweet at us, the whole 9 yards there. So let's get this started here. Let's break down the updated college football playoff or college football ranking first. We've already talked about it a little bit. We're just going to touch on the most updated version here. Again, this is not – oh, sorry, I dropped something. Again, this is not official. Mitch, what happened?
Kenny Clark just signed a 4-year extension for $70 million. He's now the highest paid nose tackle in the league in history.
All right, so there you go. Hey, that's huge for Green Bay. That's breaking news right here on the Fourth String Sports Playoff. Kenny Clark signing a 4-year, $70 million extension.
Plus other extensions happened.
Yes, they did. We are also going to touch on those here. Actually, let's touch on those first. So, George Kittle for the Niners.
We'll talk about more.
We'll talk about a little bit more today. Signed a massive extension, but the other notable one, Travis Kelce for the Chiefs. It was a big extension day for tight ends. Signed, I think, a 4-year, $60 million or something along those lines?
His was like 50 something, and
Kelsey's was like Kelsey's 5 for 75, I think.
No, it was other way around. Kittle was 75.
What was
Kelsey was 50.
Kittle got more.
Kittle got a lot more.
Kelsey got less.
Yeah, but Kelsey only had a 4-year. Kittle had a 5, I believe.
Yeah, and like 575, 457.
I think it's something like that. So big day for tight ends. We'll talk about George Kittle. I mean, that's big for both of them. Both of them had great seasons. Travis Kelce was instrumental in the Chiefs' Super Bowl run. George Kittle was instrumental in the Niners' Super Bowl run. Great for both guys. George Kittle is a great story. He was one of 3 players at Iowa to get that last scholarship. He ended up winning out. Really just kind of helped push forward that Iowa tight end narrative there now that we got guys like TJ Hawkinson and George Fant in the league. And even some guys before him who came in the league like Dallas Clark played tight end at Iowa.
And Nate Stanley. Don't forget about Nate Stanley.
Yeah, Nate Stanley, other stuff like that. We do have NFL training camp that's happening. We'll get some updates on that in the next couple of episodes, so that's big. But to look at the updated coaches poll now, remember 2 Power 5 conferences and 2 non-Power 5 conferences have completely canceled football. The Mountain West, the MAC, the non-Power 5, and the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, the Power 5. So the updated list, we have Clemson at 1, Bama at 2, Georgia at 3, LSU at 4, Oklahoma, Florida, Notre Dame go 5, 6, 7, Auburn, Texas A&M, Texas go 8, 9, 10. Then we have OK State at 11, North Carolina at 12, UCF at 13, Cincinnati at 14, and Virginia Tech at 15. Iowa State, Tennessee, Kentucky, Memphis, and Baylor go 16 through 20, and Louisville, Miami, Appalachian State, Navy, and Virginia round out the 25. So we've talked about, we already agreed some of these teams like Texas A&M were way too high. Well, now they get a lot higher because Pac-12 and Big Ten aren't playing. So A&M moves into the top 10. They're at 9. Notre Dame is at 7. What do you guys make of this list here?
I still don't like Notre Dame in the top 10. I'm not really sold on them. I know Ian Book's pretty good, but I'm not sold on the team as a whole. I don't know how Chuba Hubbard is willing his team into the top 10. Because, I mean, OK State's at 11.
Yeah.
I know, but still, he's willing them to, like, the borderline of top 10. And if one of these teams in the top 10 loses and they win, they go up. So
yeah.
I'm really astonished by that. Props to UNC getting placed appropriately, I think. But otherwise, the only other question is, like, Tennessee being top 25, which you explained a little bit, but I still think it's a head-scratcher. But I think everything else is pretty decent to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Mitch said, honestly. I mean, I like Notre Dame. I think that I think 7's too high. I do think that they're like 10, 11, 12, right around there, but not 7. But again, because we lost teams like Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, it makes sense. But again, like the Tennessee's like the Nebraska effect almost, where it's like they finished really well last season. They've been recruiting really, 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 really well. So people are a little bit high on them. I'm just psyched that, like, you know what, if we have UNC, UCF, we can have those. If both of those teams win out, we might get them in the college football playoff, and that would be pretty fun. Because I'm thinking that now, because we're losing to, SEC bias is still totally there. So if there's a one-loss SEC team, they're probably going to get in. But if we have an undefeated UCF or Cincinnati or Memphis get through, because the AAC, I think, is actually a better football league than the ACC. I think that we could see one of them finally making the playoff this year without having to contend with a Big Ten or Pac-12 team, and I'd be down with that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the American Conference is a lot more well-rounded and not so top-heavy as the ACC is. Obviously, like, competition-wise, the ACC wins, but I mean, 12, 13, 14 goes UNC, UCF, Cincinnati. I think that's big. The possibility of us getting like a American Conference championship game with a top 10 ranked Cincinnati and a top 10 ranked UCF would be awesome to see. Navy cracks the top 25. I know a lot of these are by default because major conferences left. I mean, I think between the Big Ten and the Pac-12, they had 8 top 25 spots.
Yeah.
So you have to fill those as is. Miami being 25, I don't agree with. They played a miserable bowl game against Louisiana Tech. They had a bad season. They didn't bring in a ton of talent, with the exception of De'Ara King, the quarterback from Houston.
That's probably why they got the spot.
Most likely, but again, they didn't recruit well. They didn't bring in a ton of talent. Their star defensive player is opting out, so I don't really agree with it. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Again, this isn't the official one.
Well, who would you replace them with then? Because I couldn't name a team. And
that's exactly it. Is that there's not really anybody that I off the top
Western
of my
Michigan
head could off the top of my head I could replace him with, because we've lost 30 teams.
Yeah, exactly. So it's probably because of King and because such a small playing field.
That's why they get the spot. Then the ones that could be good from other conferences, that like those fringe teams that have had a history of being really successful, like Boise State in Northern Illinois, Ohio, aren't playing either. So it's like those teams that we could, like those group of 5 teams that we could like possibly put in, they're not there either. So and I just think that right now people are, I mean, I personally am just glad that we're going to have some kind of college football. Am I still very, very worried for these players and their safety? And do I think it's going to last the entire season? God, no. But, I mean, at this point, I hope that with all of those teams, with 30 teams dropping out and losing 8 top 8 of the best teams in the country like that, I hope the coaches redecide on some of these things and get some of these teams not nearly as high as they should be, or even in the standings at all. And just to the point, like the ACC has 5 teams in this list. The first is Clemson. The second highest is Virginia Tech, whereas the AAC has 4 teams, and they're all ranked higher than like 3 of the 5. So it's like, I think like I really, really want the AAC to replace the ACC as like that Power 5, because at this point it's just Clemson. I mean, yeah, Virginia and
Yeah.
UNC are expected to have good seasons, but what I'm saying is that, like, unless they show a drastic, like, it's almost like watching the old days of the SEC or the Big 12, where it was like Big 12 was like, it's Nebraska and Oklahoma, nobody else is going to show up, or the SEC, it's Alabama and LSU and Florida, nobody else is going to show up. It's getting to the point where it's like, I know who's going to win the ACC. Like, I miss the days of, like, Georgia Tech making it to the ACC championship. Do you guys remember when Georgia Tech made it to the ACC championship game? That was a wild season.
Yeah,
I miss
you know,
those days.
I do understand where you're coming from there. Obviously, there's no way it's ever going to happen. You're never going to replace teams like North Carolina State with teams like Appalachian State and Memphis.
Appalachian State's part of the AAC?
I don't remember what conference they're a part of, if they're CUSA or whatever. But I'm high on App State. I've been high on App State. They've played Penn State really competitive last season. This is a great team out there for Appalachian State. I'm high on them. I'd like to see them a little bit higher, and I'm interested to see how their season plays out. And the other benefit is like, so a team like Cincinnati, right? Everybody knew Cincinnati was a really good team, but Cincinnati had to play at Ohio State, and they got creamed. Well, this year they don't have to do that. So now we're really going to see the hype for these teams that's going to exist. So it is interesting. But now let's move ahead to the NBA playoff. So the NBA playoffs are going to start in the next couple of days here. We have our matchups locked up. We're going to round out the East first. We already talked about Bucks versus Magic. We said that the Bucks should win that in 4. And we talked about Raptors-Nets. Raptors should win that in 4, but we wouldn't be surprised if the Nets pulled out a win. So let's move on here. We have Boston at the 3 seed going to play Philadelphia, the 76ers, at the 6 seed. I say this series is going to go 5 no matter what, even though Ben Simmons isn't there. I think the Sixers are good enough to pull out at least 1 win. I would not be surprised if it goes to 6. I do not see the series go to 7 without Ben Simmons. But I think that the Celtics don't have a ton of talent to match up against Joel Embiid. Sorry, I had an untimely cough there. To match up against Joel Embiid only. But the Celtics backcourt is dominant when they can get their shots going. That's the really big caveat, is that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have to both put up at least 18 points for them to win most of these games. It can't be that one puts up 30 and one puts up 2, or it can't be that one puts up 25 and one's only basket is because he was the nearest guy to $2.
But
like, it has to be consistent, but I think it's going to be consistent more likely than it's not. I'm not counting Gordon Hayward out. I don't like what I've seen from Gordon Hayward in his time at Boston, even post-injury. But the Celtics,
good,
he's been good, but we're also expecting the birth of his child. That's the thing you have to remember, is that we're also expecting to hear when he's going to have that baby, and he will have to leave the bubble. And at this point, it's going to happen at some point in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So Celtics win this series, absolutely no problem. Does it go to 5? Does it go to 6? That's what I'm questioning.
Yeah, I definitely think the Celtics are going to win this matchup. I like their lineup a little bit better than the Sixers have, just because of the Ben Simmons injury, and just because I'm not a really big fan of their backcourt. I think the Celtics have a way better bench than the Sixers do at this point, and I think Brad Stevens is heads and shoulders above Brett Brown as a coach. And I agree with you, Brady. I think Joel Embiid is good enough to get them 1 against the Celtics, even with Ben Simmons not being there. So I have Celtics in 5.
See, in my opinion, it can go anywhere from 4 to 6, just depending on what happens, because let's not forget Robert Williams is back, and he has been playing pretty well in the bubble. Not like
TJ Warren level?
Not like Warren level, not like Booker level, but like pretty good from a person that missed most of the season. Or like Nurkic level. But he's doing pretty well. So, I mean, I think that Robert Williams could give him some, like maybe him and Marcus Smart double teaming Joel Embiid. Maybe that would be really funny to watch, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I agree with both you guys. I think it can go anywhere from 4 to 6. Just because it's the 76ers and they usually play us really competitively no matter who's on the court. I have to go 4. I have to go somewhere between 4 and 6. I can't like settle. I don't think it's going to go any more than 6 like with Brady. But yeah, I agree that I agree that Tatum and Brown need to have big games in some way. It doesn't need to be points, but they need to be either really good defensively or they need to be dishing the ball out. They just need to have good games in general. They can't just put up 2 points, even though we only lost by 5 to you guys when you only put
It
up
was
2
like
points?
9 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be fine. We'll be fine. But yeah, Celtics are going to win the series.
So if we all agree the Celtics are going to win the series, that makes for a really interesting round 2 matchup, which is going to be Celtics versus Raptors.
Now, I'm going to put a caveat in on the Raptors because if the Nets played like they did against Portland, that's going to be a tough out.
And that's why I said that I wouldn't be so. I think these games between the Nets and the Raptors are going to be closer more often than blowouts, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Nets are able to pull out a win. Like, you can play a really tough physical series and win 4 of the 5 games. Like, it's happened before. And I think the Nets have the capability of throwing some haymakers at the Raptors. But I don't see them having a ton of success.
Caris LeVert his name should be in consideration with bubble MVP. Should he win it? God, no. There's been much better play, but he should at least be in consideration getting some votes because that guy with a bad knee balled out against Portland. And I mean, if he had him, and he had a good clean shot at the end, if he had hit that, that would have been insane. But that guy balled out, and he's the only reason the Nets are playing as well as they are.
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting. We're going to see how they set themselves up there. So then that moves on to the 4 versus 5 matchup. This is the one we've been most excited for. We've talked about it. This is Pacers versus Heat. Now, Pacers technically get the home in this series, even though it's in the bubble since they're the 4 seed. These teams met up twice in the bubbles. They split the series. Heat won the first matchup. Pacers won the second. TJ Warren versus Jimmy Butler, man. These guys are mouthing at each other.
They hate each other. It's lovely.
And TJ Warren, I think, is the unanimous bubble MVP, even though Devin Booker has been playing absolutely fantastic.
And Lillard.
Lillard putting up 61. I'm sorry.
But TJ Warren has just come out of absolutely nowhere to play. Yeah, I don't know, something like that. We'll announce awards or whatever. This series to me has to go 6. I'm expecting it to go 7. This series will absolutely go 6 to me. Who do I give the nod to, though? I have no idea. I really don't, because if Jimmy Butler can take over a game or two, man, the Heat look really good, especially if those young guys can step up. But the Pacers, I think, are a much more well-rounded team. So I'm going to go a toss-up here. I'm going to say it's going to go best of 7, and I'm going to give it to the Pacers because I kind of like they're not as young. They're a little bit more consistent. They're not as flashy. And I think if they can do a good job of holding Butler to anywhere from that 20 to 28 points per game range, and they're a really good perimeter defense as well, I'm going to give my nod to the Pacers, but this is an absolute toss-up for me.
Yeah, I definitely think this is going to be the best matchup in the East for sure. It definitely is a toss-up, but I have to go with the Heat in 6. And the only reason why the Heat have an advantage is just because of health. Because when you look at the Pacers, Domantas Sabonis is hurt right now. I don't know if he's going to be in there and when they play each other, so that would be a huge loss. And TJ Warren, if I recall right, didn't play his last game, and he's dealing with an injury. So who knows when he'll be available. So if those two guys are not healthy and ready to play for this matchup, I definitely think the Heat will definitely win this.
Yeah, I'm going to go Heat in 7 because Victor Oladipo hasn't looked himself. And I get that he has not played a lot of basketball anytime soon. I get that, and he's trying to get back into the groove of things, but it's still a little concerning. He just hasn't been playing consistently. He's the only Pacer that hasn't been playing consistently, honestly. But again, I agree with Brady. If we get Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero that we've seen for most of the bubble, the Heat win this. And so that's why I'm going with it, because those two have been playing relatively consistently, except for the second half against the Bucks. Honestly, was the only time where they weren't playing really well. So I have to go Heat in 7. But if Victor Oladipo finds himself, I'm excited for this series. I'm really excited for this series. It's the best series in the East in the first round by far.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Jones Jr. for the Heat looks like he's going to be out for a while. He had a scary injury in the last game there against the Pacers. this is going to be an awesome series to watch. I mean, Malcolm Brogdon is a great player. He's a great lockdown defender. He's going to get you about 15 points and a couple assists, a couple of rebounds a game. And I think
50, 40, 90.
Yeah, I think that he has the opportunity to be a real solid defender. Oladipo is still Oladipo. I think he'll be able to turn it on in the playoffs. They've gotten some good consistency off their bench. Guys like Doug McDermott and TJ McDonald have actually played really well. McDermott put up 23 in the last matchup here against the Heat. TJ Warren hasn't played, we'll say, consistently against the Heat, but it's going to be very interesting to watch. So you guys are both picking the Heat in that series. I'm going with the Pacers, but we're all saying at least 6, if not 7, in that series. So now let's move on to the West, and let's give just a moment of silence for the Phoenix Suns, who, even though they went 8-0 in the West in the bubble, they did not make the playoffs due to losing 3 or 4 matchups head-to-head against the Grizzlies. So 5-second moment of silence, and we're done. So now that
Did you guys see the meme for that?
No.
It came out right after. So as soon as the Suns got eliminated, Bleacher Report came up with a meme, and they used a scene from Yu-Gi-Oh! And it had Devin Booker's face, and the main character from Yu-Gi-Oh! Was on his knees and banging the ground, and said and the character was saying it should have been me. Why him? It should have been me.
Oh. So the play-in series will be the 9 seed Memphis playing the 8 seed Portland. Now, keeping in mind that the 8 seed Portland only has to win 1 game, Memphis has to beat the Trailblazers 2 times in order to lock in that playoff seed there. So let's look at that play-in series. Who are we picking? Are we picking Memphis to win 2, or are we picking Portland to pick 1? To me, this is pretty easy, and I'm going to say Portland needs to win at least 1 game. That's all they got to do. Dame time is here. It's looking great. He put up 61 in the last game in order to get them that locked up seed. I like Memphis as a young team, but there's no chance they beat Portland here.
Yeah, I think it's a fucking obvious answer. What time is it? It's Dame time right now, baby. He's balling out.
It's about 10:14.
Yeah, Dame time. And he's got CJ McCollum as a really great partner for him. Yusuf Nurkic has been, awesome for them and really helping them out right now. Melo will get them the occasional good play. So I definitely think Portland is going to win today. And, it's going to be a game, but I don't think there's ever going to be any doubt of, Portland getting upsetted today.
Yeah, if Jaren Jackson Jr. was playing, that's just a fun name to say. I have to pause. That's a fun name.
JJJ.
If Jackson Jr. was playing today, I think it'd be a little bit closer. Or I could see how they could pull it past, but right now it's Ja Morant needs to score 40 for this to be competitive. Can he do it? Absolutely he can. But Absolutely. Which is what Flanders says. But honestly, again, it's Dame is putting up at least 30 points. He's my bubble MVP at this point. Honestly. And McCollum's been playing really well. Melo has had a resurgence. I'm excited for playoff Melo, actual playoff Melo, not this sad inclination of what he was at OKC.
And Houston.
Well, did he ever make the playoffs with Houston? I thought he got cut before they made the beginning of the season.
Only there for 7 games or something.
Yeah, but still, it was sad.
It was really sad. I'm excited for this version of Melo. Zach Collins and Nurkic are some of the best. That's one of the best front courts besides. That's one of the best front courts right now in the West.
Yeah.
So no, I'm excited. I think this is Blazers in 1. If it does go 2, I'm not worried about the Blazers losing 2 in a row. They won't.
Yeah, no, me neither. And the first game is today at 1:30, so it could be over today. But that then brings up our 1 versus 8 matchup, which is Lakers versus, we all agree, Blazers, which means for the first time, I believe, now I could be wrong, but I believe this is the first time we're going to get to see Melo versus LeBron in the playoffs. I don't know if they ever played each other when he was in New York. I don't, so I'm going to put a caveat on that.
I forgot that Dame Lillard went to New York for a little bit.
No, Carmelo.
Oh,
was with the Knicks.
You're talking about Melo. Yeah.
Melo versus LeBron. Remember?
Sorry.
played at Syracuse and then was with the Knicks. So that's going to be an awesome narrative to see because two guys whose career have gone the exact opposite. A lot of people were really high on Melo, and they should have been. He played really good with the Nuggets, and then unfortunately, the Knicks as an organization fell apart. But that brings in Blazers versus Lakers, and the Lakers have not looked really good in the bubble, and they haven't looked really good this whole season, frankly. I mean, 52 wins, you can't sleep on them. You absolutely can't sleep on them. Are we going to see playoff LeBron? I mean, yeah, at some point we're going to see him. But where does this series go? I'm going to go with a massive underdog prediction. I'm going to say the Lakers win the series, but it's going to go to 6. I think this is going to be a hard-fought series. I think that the Blazers are going to give them a run for their money. The Blazers actually played Golden State pretty well in the Western Conference last year, except Dame Lillard had a couple of busted ribs, and that hurt his play. This is a scrappy Portland team, and I think it's time for Portland to maybe put themselves on the map a little bit more. I still think the Lakers win, but the Nurkic versus Davis matchup is going to be great to watch, and then LeBron versus whoever the starting small forward is, whoever the Blazers put on him, and then
fingers crossed it's Melo.
I doubt it will be, but and then the Blazers backcourt has an obvious advantage over the Lakers. So
what about Bald Eagle Caruso?
I mean, Bald Eagle Caruso is Bald Eagle Caruso, but he's not Dame time. I think the Lakers win, but I think this series is going to 6.
Yeah, I think that the Blazers would definitely be a tough out. I'm going to say this. I'm going to have 2 kind of predictions. So the caveat for this one is if LeBron is playing the way that he's been playing so far in the bubble, I'm going to go with Blazers in 7. Just because Anthony Davis is most likely going to have to play by himself and will his team because the rest of his team is not consistent. You know, Kyle Kuzma has the talent, but we've seen from him he's hot and cold. I really don't like the rest, his supporting cast. Whereas, you know, Dame Time has been hot this whole time. You know, he's got a partner in CJ McCollum, and the backcourt for the Lakers aren't that great, so they can absolutely dominate that matchup. And like you said, Yusuf Nurkic can, you know, be a guy to cover Anthony Davis, and I just like what the Blazers bring more as a team as a whole. And you can't sleep on Gary Trent Jr., who's been a really good bench piece for the Blazers.
He's shooting 50% from the three-point line.
Yeah, and you got that, and Melo will give you that occasional clutch shot. I got to go with that if LeBron's not playing like LeBron. But if LeBron somehow wakes up once this series starts and he's playing like himself, then I'm going to go with Lakers in 6 then.
Now, I would like to point something out. So the Lakers have 4 players who average more than 10 points a game. And that is Anthony Davis with – one second, let me get it pulled up again. Anthony Davis averages 26. LeBron puts up 25. Kuzma at 12.8. And Dion Waiters at 11.9, right?
This is in the bubble?
This is the whole season.
Oh.
This is the whole season they have that. The Blazers have 7 players who average at least 10 points per game. Hood, Ariza, Anthony has 15.4 per game. Whiteside 15.5. Now he's still started 61 games of the season. Nurkic, who's only played 8 the whole in the bubble, putting up 17.6, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists per game, including 1 steal and 2 blocks. And then you have McCollum at 22, Lillard at 30. So if we look at consistency, man, Blazers look a lot more consistent than the Lakers do. So, Skylar, what's your prediction?
Before you even rattled off those stats, I was going to say Blazers in 7. Because
really?
No.
Skylar, I got you, bro.
Because I don't care because from this Lakers team, it just doesn't seem that they want it enough. You know, there's a lack of just passion in how they're playing. And I'm sorry, from a person, I don't really I like LeBron. I respect LeBron. He's one of the few players, he's one of the all-time greats that I can look at and be like, I respect you because you do a lot.
He's just built different.
But LeBron is known for his passion in playing basketball, and it's just gone. Like, I have not seen any of it. Again, I'll agree with Mitch. If LeBron gets that passion, this is going to be so much better of a series. But even then, the Blazers are good enough with Nurkic back, with Zach Collins playing the way that he's been playing, with Dame Time averaging 30 fucking points, and I'm sure it's probably closer to 40 in the bubble, that I have to go with Blazers in 7 because Dame Lillard wants that ring. And he will go up against anybody and single-handedly push this team to win. So I have to go Blazers in 7.
I almost think that it's I don't even know if he wants the ring as much as his driving passion is to meet the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals, just to beat them. Like with the stuff we saw happen with Paul George and Pat Beverly, like I get it. But Dame Lillard, he's knocked a lot of people in the West out of the playoffs. I mean, Paul George a couple of times, Pat Beverly a couple of times. And I think that now that they're together, he wants to do it again. And
I think, but he's also
it.
I also think that with everything that happened in Portland this last, like, while the bubble was happening, like, Dame is one of the few. He's almost like a Giannis, where he's like, he loves the city he plays in so much, where he's like, he wants a ring for Portland. And I think that everything that was happening in Portland is just egging him on, because he's like, they have our back. Now it's time for us to have their back. Let's go get a fucking ring for Portland. And I mean,
and I definitely think that that's part of it. I think just beating the Lakers in round 1 of the series.
Oh no, that's motivation enough
like,
for him.
would be good enough. Do I think this team could win a championship? I don't. But this team is built in that underdog way. They're almost built like when the underdog Warriors beat the about 15 years ago.
Or I would even say I'm trying to think of that team recent. Well, I mean, even the Warriors that beat when Steve Kerr's first year, when the Warriors weren't doing well, and then they went, they were like the 4th seed, and they made it also all the way to the conference finals.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Like this team has a drive, it has a passion. So now that's interesting. I have the Lakers winning the series. Mitch has 2 different predictions depending on the play of LeBron. Skyler's picking Blazers in 7.
I'm going Blazers all in.
So that's definitely interesting. So that moves on to the 2-7 seed, which is the Dallas Mavericks at the 7 seed going to play the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, the Mavericks have absolutely played really well. Luka Doncic is a force. Kristaps Porzingis, I don't think has played really as well. He's not as consistent, but he's silently pretty good. I'm going to say Clippers in 5. I don't know if this Mavs team can string together continuous success. This is a team that has, even the game against the Bucks, right? They were 2-10 on games where they had the final possession for a win. And if it comes down to it, who do I trust more? Unfortunately, I trust Kawhi, and I trust Paul George, and I trust Pat Beverly. So I think the Mavs are good enough to pull out a win, but I'm going to say Clippers in 5.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. I have the Clippers in 5 as well. I just think, right now in Dallas, it's kind of the Luka show. Porzingis is there, but he's not like Porzingis just entering the league for the Knicks kind of Porzingis. He's kind of a shell of himself right now. And I just don't think his supporting cast matches up to what the Clippers have as a team and a bench. And, they have Doc Rivers, one of the best coaches ever, coaching them. So that's why I have Clippers in 5.
Yeah, I'll go Clippers in 6 because I think Luka is good enough to win 2 games. I think that the Mavs are playing good enough to win 2 games. They're not consistent. I'll give them that. But I still think that if we went like there was no restart, no play-in, I think this team would have gotten higher than 7th seed, just in my opinion. So I think that they're better than 7 in the West. So I'll give them 2 games, because I feel like that they deserve that. But again, this is a Clippers team that I also there's a lot of motivation for this Clippers team too, because they want to show that they're the best team in LA, which in my opinion they are, at least right now. So we'll see.
All right, so that moves on to the 3 versus 6 seed, and that's going to be the Denver Nuggets, a really good team who gets slept on versus the Utah Jazz. Both of these teams went 3-5 in the bubble. Um, this to me might be a clean sweep for the Nuggets. I don't really like anything I've seen from the Jazz. This is a team that doesn't really win games they're supposed to, and this was a team that was supposed to be a lot better with the pickup of Mike Conley. This was supposed to be a Conley and Mitchell backcourt that was supposed to do dominant things with Rudy Gobert and anchoring the defense in the middle, but they haven't shown that. And I just like what the Nuggets bring to the table. I think Jokic is a great player. I think Jamal Murray is a great player. And I think the Nuggets are a really well-rounded and well-coached team. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Jazz win a game, but we haven't seen the Jazz do well in the playoffs for a very long time. So I'm going to say Nuggets in 4.
Yeah, I think it's an easy decision. Nuggets are going to get a clean sweep. The Jazz have been a disappointment. The Michael Conley trade has really blown up in their face. He's not produced what we expect out of him. I think that's hurt the team. I kind of feels like Donovan Mitchell's kind of by himself. Rudy Gobert's okay, but he fucked over the league. And I really don't like the bench for the Jazz. With the Nuggets, their starting lineup is solid. Jokic is one of the more underappreciated players in the league right now. Maybe it's just because he's a center. But I really like the potential of that starting lineup, and the Nuggets bench is amazing. I mean, you got Michael Porter Jr., who's been balling out, and then who is it? Bobo plays with the Nuggets, right? Yeah, and you got Bobo, who's been busting out in the bubble as well on your bench. So you take all that in consideration, it's a sweep, honestly.
Yeah, see, it could go 5, but I'm gonna go with sweep like you guys. And I think that again, it's just Utah has just not playing consistently. I'll say at the beginning of the year, Mike Conley wasn't playing nearly as good as anybody thought he was supposed to. He picked it up a little bit, but again, not to the level that is expected of Mike Conley. And sadly, Spider-Man can't do it by himself. I wish he could, because I love watching Mitchell play. I love watching him play. He's just so the love for basketball is there, and I love that he absolutely hates his teammate right now, who gave him COVID. Which I love the beginning where the first game there's like, well, what's Mitchell's opinion on Rudy? And they're like, we're just trying to win games right now. And I'm like, that says a lot. That says a lot. So no, I as much as I love watching, I want the Jazz to succeed again because I'm getting tired of the Lakers being a good team in the West. Which I mean, again, they went and span without being good, but still, Utah's not going to win the series.
Yeah. So that moves on to the 4 versus 5 matchup. I think very similar to Pacers Heat. This is the one that we're most excited to watch, and that is the Thunder, a team that was given a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs at the beginning of the season, who instead won 44 games, 28 losses, going up against the Rockets, who finished with the exact same record. Russell Westbrook will miss, I believe it was announced, at least the first 2 games of this series. Due to an injury. I'm going to give my nod to the Thunder. And I'm going to say Thunder win in 6. I think that they get I think they're going to get the first 2 wins without Russell Westbrook. And then I think Westbrook's going to come back. It's going to go 1-1. And then it's going to go Rockets, Thunder, Rockets. And then with that 6 matchup there, I'm going to give it to the Thunder. I'm really high on this team. They've played really well this season. They've beaten teams like the Lakers. I really like this Thunder team, and historically we've seen it from Russell Westbrook and from James Harden. They don't do well in the playoffs, and their small ball matchup is going to be matched up against small ball for the Thunder. And the Thunder play better defensively. They're pretty well rounded on offense. So I'm going to give it to the Thunder. I'm going to go Thunder in 6.
You know what? Buy me a ticket for that hype train. I got Thunder in 6 as well. You know what? I love what the Thunder are doing this year. Chris Paul's shouting out the doubters. The Rockets, they're playing that small ball, and of course Harden and Westbrook looks daunting, but with Westbrook out 2 games, you can assume that the Thunder can take those. And even with Westbrook there, I mean, the Rockets are okay, but we know Harden's a choker in the playoffs. Westbrook doesn't do that well, and then the rest of the Rockets is, trash, let's be honest. And with the Thunder, you get Chris CP3 being point guard right now. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's, doing amazing since he got traded. Steven Adams is a great player for them as well. And they got a really rounded out team. And I think Billy Donovan is showing his potential as a coach. So, yeah, I'm going to buy into that. I definitely think they could beat the Rockets in 6, especially. So that's where I'm standing on that.
I have to think. Just give me a second.
I mean, so while he thinks
No. Okay. The Rockets are okay. The Rockets are okay, but they're not OKC. That's all I'll just say. OKC.
That was clever. Is that what you had to think about?
Yeah. Well, no. I had to think about. I had to think about. The N stands for knowledge, guys. No, I was thinking about whether or not I needed to use it because Rockets in 7.
Rockets
or not
in
Rockets.
7?
No, Thunder in 7. Sorry.
Thunder in 7. Okay.
Thunder in 7.
He's not on the hype train.
Yeah.
Choo-choo.
Because I said Thunder in 7. I'm on the hype.
No, you got to be on 6 though.
No, I'm not.
Then you're not on the hype train. Sorry,
Bucks
bud.
in 6. Bucks in 6. So go ahead, Skyler.
No, I agree with you guys. I think that the fact that Westbrook missing 2 games hurts Houston's chance in this. This is a revenge game for Chris Paul. I wouldn't want to play against Chris Paul when he's like motivated like this.
Yeah.
Shai has been putting amazing. I mean, Dennis Schroeder's putting up 19 from the bench. Steven Adams has shown that he's a good big man. Yeah. Again, it's gonna be a good series. I don't think it's gonna be as good as Blazers Lakers, in my opinion, but it's still gonna be a good series. And I'm gonna go OKC in 7.
Yeah, I think that the key matchup here for a guy that nobody talks about is actually going to be Danilo Gallinari.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally forgot he's on the team.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's put up 18 points, about 5 rebounds, 2 assists per game. Not standout statistics by any stretch of the imagination. But we know what the Thunder or what the Rockets are going to play with. They're going to play with this small ball. And we know Steven Adams is going to get his numbers. But if Gallinari can ball out and he can put up north of 20 a game with a couple of rebounds, that really gives a nod to the Thunder because the Rockets don't really have anyone to cover them now that they traded Clint Capella and they're focusing primarily on small ball. If the Rockets can dominate the rebounding the way that the Bucks didn't against the Rockets, if the Thunder can dominate rebounding the way that the Bucks didn't against the Rockets, this looks really well for the Thunder. But to me, that play is ultimately going to come down to Danilo Gallinari. He has to be consistent, and his issues with consistency were one reason why the Clippers didn't beat the Warriors in round 1 of the playoffs last year, because he played really well until it came time to seal some games. So that's going to be – I think the NBA playoffs are going to be really interesting. The round 2 matchups, obviously we're a little bit in disagreement here on who's going to win that 1-8, so we'll leave that up there. But then we're going to get what would be Clippers versus Nuggets, which I think is going to be a great series in round 2. And then we would get winner of Lakers, Blazers, most likely playing the Thunder from what we all agree on, which, again, I think is going to be great. The one thing that I will give the Thunder, and I'll especially give Chris Paul, because I believe it was Brad Stevens who said it, Chris Paul is always the loudest guy on the court. Like, he will call out the other team's plays ahead of time before the other team really even knows what the play is. I love Chris Paul. I love what he brings to the table. I hope that he balls out, gets that revenge, and I think it's time for the Chris Paul revenge tour. So now that we've wrapped that up, let's move on.
Wait, one question.
Yeah.
Do you think Westbrook and Harden are going to have a grudge playing OKC?
I think Westbrook might, but not.
No, because it's what Westbrook wanted. Westbrook wanted out of OKC. He got what he wanted. It would be like LeBron having a grudge against the Cavs, or against.
Why would he? They're trash.
Well, no, that's. Or against the Heat, right? Or against guys like that.
Okay.
It would be like Kawhi having a grudge against the Raptors. To me, it just doesn't make sense. He wanted out of there. Melo doesn't have a grudge against the Nuggets, that kind of stuff. I don't think they have a grudge, but I definitely think that beating them would solidify a lot of stuff. And I think losing to them would put up a massive question mark as to was this trade really worth it, especially with all the players in the draft consideration that the Thunder got from the Rockets. So with that being said, let's move on to our what's list. So who posed the question? Was it Mitch?
I did. Yeah, so my what's list for today's episode was the top 5 college football rivalries, and I think Skylar starts us off.
I do. This one was really fun, but it was a lot easier than the one Brady gave us because I didn't have to like go and look up percentages and shit. This one I was just kind of like either what I know of college football or the rivalries I just liked watching. So I have one on my list that I never actually got to see one of these games, because I
swear to God, if it's Yale versus Harvard.
No, it's not. even though that is my honorable mention, and I have watched a couple of those games because that is a historic rivalry, asshole.
No, it's Whitewater versus Oshkosh.
Yeah. Woo! All right.
We'll just wait to see what D3 rivalry Brady pulls out of his fucking
Whitewater
ass.
Oshkosh.
Yeah. Okay. Number 5, I have Notre Dame, Michigan. Even though it's not played anymore, like growing up, Dad being a Notre Dame fan, grandfather being a Notre Dame fan, it was a fun rivalry to watch. The last time they played, I believe it was just a great game in general. Those uniforms sucked, but it was a great game. And it was the one team that my dad wanted to beat more than any other team in the world. And it's the reason he hates Tom Brady, because Tom Brady went to Michigan. But he loves Jim Harbaugh, and I wonder why. It's almost like he played quarterback for the Bears or something. But yeah, Notre Dame, Michigan, and it's also just a really historic rivalry. They have been playing each other for a really long time. There's talks of them getting the rivalry back up and going, which I really hope happens because it's a great rivalry. Number 4, the game, Michigan, Ohio State. I have to put it on there because it's almost synonymous with college football rivalry. Even though Michigan's dropped the ball the last 3 times, they do own the series.
14 of 15 or something to Ohio State recently.
It's ridiculous. They still own the series record, which is baffling in my mind. I believe if somebody needs to fact check me, please do. But Michigan, Ohio State, that is synonymous with college football rivalries in general. Number 3, Wisconsin versus Minnesota, Battle of the Axe. That's just a fun game to watch, honestly. I mean, in what other game do you get to see guys take a big, huge axe and chop down a fucking goalpost? That's just great. And specifically with Minnesota being a lot better the last couple of years, it's gotten to be a better rivalry. I mean, they took the axe from you guys, They took it once. But again, still, nobody thought they could do it, and they did, and it's amazing. Wisconsin still owns the series record by a lot, though.
No, it's actually really close. It's
Yeah. It's like the Bears Packers.
Oh, okay.
Give me a minute. I have it pulled up here. It's 61-60 with 8 ties. Wisconsin.
Okay. So they might tie it this year then. Not in spring. They might tie it in the spring. They could do it. They could do it without having Jonathan Taylor Thomas and.
There's a guy named Graham Mertz coming in onto the show.
Who hasn't played a single down of college football.
Minnesota's out their number 1 wide receiver, and they have a lot of players opt out. Plus, we're not even playing this year, so who knows?
Spring. I'm saying in the spring. But no, I have to say it's a good rivalry to watch. It's usually a really competitive game. It's what Big Ten football is supposed to be. It's 2 teams running the ball down each other's throats, and the first person to say uncle loses. Number 2, the 80s and 90s Nebraska versus Florida teams, honestly. 10 times between 1980 and 2001, Nebraska played a Florida team. And in those games, it was up for who was winning the national championship. It was Florida State, Miami. Those are just some of the best games college football has ever been played. Are some of those teams, and those were the best teams in college football going against each other. And as a Nebraska fan, I was going between Nebraska, Oklahoma, which is also a really good one and deserves consideration. Not saying it's number 2, but it deserves consideration. But Nebraska versus Florida teams, just the impact it had on college football. 10 times they met, and 10 national champions were determined in that time from a Nebraska or a Florida team. It's just I've as a Nebraska fan, I've gone back and watched some of those bowl games because that's all we can really hope for is going back to that, honestly. But it's part of our history, and I had to put it on there. I had to put a Nebraska rivalry on there, because it needed to be on there. And Nebraska and Miami hate each other, rightfully so, because Miami fucking sucks. And then number 1, Army Navy. I don't like Army football. I don't like Navy football, but every year I will watch the Army Navy game because it's just a great game. It is college football. That is like that one Friday every year. Nobody else really plays except for Navy and Army, and it's great. And the tradition behind it, seeing Army win and getting to sing second for the first time in 6 or 7 years. Now they've won 3 straight is amazing. Army football and Navy football are on the rise. They're becoming better, which is always better for college football. These are 2 of the first teams that ever started playing college football. So yeah, I have to put just from what it means to the sport, Army Navy goes number 1.
All right.
I think that was a good list. The only one I didn't like was Ohio State, Michigan, and that's just because of where it's at right now. I mean,
Yeah.
I get why you had to put it on, but I mean, nobody gives a fuck about that game. I mean, it gets the big time, prime time stuff, but fans who aren't Michigan or Ohio State, they don't care about that game. It doesn't bring the appeal of like Bama versus Auburn, where everybody wants to watch it regardless of which. But I understand why you put it on. It's just my bias.
Bama Auburn was almost put on just because historically, like recently it's been like a really good rivalry, but historically there was some really bad Bama and some really bad Auburn teams in that mix. So I had to just recently isn't a very competitive game. So that's why I left it off the list.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have massive issues with it. I like the historical context to some of it. Did you have Oklahoma, Texas on your list?
I didn't. That was also one that I wrestled between. Because again, recently it's been pretty good. I mean, it usually decides who's the number 1 seed in the Big 12, and since Nebraska left, it usually decides who is going to win the championship. But the 2008 to 2016 Texas teams weren't the best Texas teams. Or whatever year it was after Colt McCoy left. I can't remember what year it was he left. 2011, 09. Yeah. So it just Texas kind of, while Oklahoma stayed up there. So that's another reason why I left it off. And it's a good rivalry. And it's if I went top 10, it'd be easily 6 or 7. But
All right, so then my list here, I have 3 honorable mentions. I did pull a D3 matchup out of my ass, and that is St. John's versus St. Thomas. We talked about St. Thomas actually on we talked about them twice on the episodes. They fill up a stadium in Minnesota. These 2 teams have played each other a bunch. They hate each other. It's a really cool D3 rivalry to watch. The other honorable mentions on my list, I have Catholics versus Convicts. I have Notre Dame versus Miami. They didn't play each other a bunch. I have it on the list solely because of the name. I think it's an awesome name. I think they're 2 historically pretty good schools.
They're amazing. It's a great name. Yeah.
And then my honorable mention is Minnesota versus Wisconsin. The reason that they're not on the list is because unlike a lot of these other matchups, they don't have massive implications when it comes to the college football world. And I think when you break down rivalries, you have to talk about the implications of the college football world. You have to talk about the winner of this game locks a seed into their conference championship or into a BCS bowl game, into a New Year's 6 bowl game or into a college football playoff. And unfortunately, that's just not how these 2 teams really work, with the exception of last year. Number 5 on my list, I have Army Navy. The reason that they're not higher, I love the pageantry. I love I love the spirit. I love it all.
It just doesn't mean anything usually.
And that's exactly it, is that it typically doesn't mean anything. For the longest time, both of these teams were independent. They don't even play themselves for a trophy. They play for a commander's trophy, which is split between how they do against Air Force. I mean, I love it. I love watching it. It's just that the games typically don't mean much other than what they mean to each other. It's a really similar rationale to what Mitch had against Ohio State, Michigan. It's the game really only matters to the guys who are playing it and the Army fans and the Navy fans.
Yeah.
Number 4 on my list, I have Ohio State versus Michigan. I have them on the list there solely because of how much they hate each other. The fact that when Ohio State beats Michigan, they get a pennant that says the team from up north. They don't even call each other by name. When Ohio State, Michigan play, Michigan blocks out all the O's on campus.
That's the best thing in the fucking world.
The fact that people don't know this, but Wolverines for Michigan get their name because of a border dispute against the state of Ohio.
Yeah, the Tulsa War, fighting over Tulsa.
Toledo,
sorry.
that kind of stuff. It's historically a great matchup. The reason they're not higher up is because Ohio State has been absolutely dominant in this series, and because unfortunately Michigan football just doesn't matter as much as it used to. I also had the record. So for Army Navy, 60 wins for Army, 52 for Navy. 60 wins for Navy, 52 for Army. Ohio State, Michigan, 58 Michigan wins, 51 Ohio State. That moves me on to number 3 on my list, and this series is only as high up because of the name of this game, which is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, and that is Georgia versus Florida. If you've watched these games
are fun.
Games are dogged. They play in Jacksonville, similar to they play at a neutral site, similar to a lot of these games here. They hate each other. The series is 53 Georgia, 43 Florida. I love the amount of talent that comes out of these games. I love that it's a big, it's a matter of state pride between the two, who won, Georgia or Florida. I love it. I love it. I love that series. And I love the name alone. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party is absolutely fantastic. The boats start to show up in Jacksonville. Everyone's in a festive mood. And then the moment the game starts, they fucking hate each other. And I love it.
It's the best thing in the world.
Number 2 on my list, I did put Oklahoma versus Texas. The series goes 62 Texas, 48 Oklahoma. There's just some great moments between these teams. They've met in the Big 12 championship, as Skylar alluded to. Once Nebraska left, it really became Oklahoma or Texas who was going to win. The amount of talent that comes out of these, the amount of memories that come out of these. Jalen Hurts had a great game against Texas. Dicker, the kicker for Texas, won it in the Red River rivalry. I love that it's called the Red River rivalry. They play during the Texas State Fair at the Cotton Bowl. It's great. It's an awesome matchup. And they're number 2 on my list. And then number 1 does go to the Iron Bowl, Alabama versus Auburn. 46 wins to Bama, 37 to Auburn. Both of these programs have had lean years, but a lot of Heisman winners have come out. A lot of national championship winners have come out. Remember, Auburn's played in the national championship twice in recent memory. Bama has played for it quite a few times. Even when Cam Newton was there at Auburn, they still almost lost to Alabama in the Iron Bowl. We talk about the
and that was the bad Bama team.
We talk about the kick 6 for Auburn, where the guy returned it, and then a guy ran out on the field, and the guy ran out on the field.
Auburn's going to win the football game.
Yeah. And a guy in the stands ran out on the field and spread the ashes on the field at Auburn. I really like this matchup because it really seems like Bama only wins at Bama. Auburn only wins at Auburn. These two teams absolutely hate each other. The state is split right down the middle. And it even goes so far as one guy poisoning the tree of the two.
He died recently.
He just died, actually, yeah. At Auburn. It's bragging rights. It's for it all. These two teams are perennial contenders in the SEC, and with the SEC being a perennial contender for the college football playoff, these matchups are great. So that's my list.
Auburn hasn't made the playoffs yet, though, have they?
No, they have not, but they've been pretty close.
They're like typically 5 or 6.
Typically, when they get close, they'll then lose to Alabama. Is what it typically happens since the playoff has really come into effect.
No, I mean, I like, given your methodology and how you picked it, like how it affects college football as a whole, I totally understand it. Even though I didn't have the two top, that your top 2 didn't make my list, because just historically they've had, or even recently, they've had some really bad teams go into that rivalry. But again,
but
no,
I
can't argue with it.
Is that even when it's a bad team, it's not like Oregon versus Oregon State, right?
Where it's like Oregon State's shit, and
like
then
everyone knows who's going to win that, or Washington versus Washington State. Even when Washington State is really good, Washington's going to win that game. To me, it's that like with all these matchups, a team who is 4-8 could beat a 12-0 team based solely off of hate. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about rivalry.
Yeah, no, I get that. If I will give you this question, if Nebraska was still in the Big 12 and Nebraska and Oklahoma were still playing each other every year, would you have put them on the list?
No.
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 And only the reason is that I can't – if Nebraska was still in the Big 12, would they still have the amount of struggles that they're having currently? That's the question that has to go with it. Now, because if they were still having the struggles they were having currently, no, I wouldn't put it on the list. But remember, the year that Nebraska left, they played in the Big 12 championship game against Texas was the year before. So if Nebraska was –
Texas and Oklahoma, we lost both.
Oh, well, then the year before that or whatever. When Texas went to the national championship, it came down to a field goal against Nebraska.
I remember that game.
You know, if Nebraska continued its trajectory in the Big 12, then yeah, they might be on there and we may have some great matchups. But I don't know. I can't put it on there historically because they haven't played each other in, at this point, 10 years. So yeah, that's why. But
I got to go to that last game, the last Nebraska-Oklahoma game in Lincoln. I got to go to that game. That was a lot of fun.
Who won? Oh, you said Oklahoma won.
Oh, no, Nebraska won. We won 10-7. 10-7 we won. It was the year because we went back-to-back years going to the Big 12 championship. That was Sue's last year when we beat Oklahoma. It was one of Oklahoma's worst teams. It was the year after Bradford was there.
Okay.
Or the year before. Yeah, before or after Bradford was there. I can't remember.
Yeah, Bradford was there in 08, so it would have been the year after.
Yeah, it was the year after Bradford was there. Before Trevor Knight was – not Trevor Knight. The other quarterback they had that did relatively well after Bradford.
Whatever. It doesn't matter what his name is. Mitch,
Yeah.
your list?
Yeah, all right, so my list. So coming in at number 5, I have Wisconsin versus Minnesota. It's a good rivalry. Who doesn't want to win an axe and then chop down the opponent's goalpost? But I think that you guys haven't mentioned with this rivalry is that the day before, the managers of each team will play a football game against each other to fight for a toolbox.
No, Mitch, that's Iowa versus Wisconsin.
What? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Fuck what I said. But yeah, Wisconsin, Minnesota is really good. At number 4, I have Oklahoma versus Texas. It's pretty good, but, it hasn't been good, past years. For 3, Alabama versus Auburn. Of late, it's been really fun to watch, the kick six. Last year's Auburn versus Bama game was great. Props to Bo Nix. Number 2, I have Catholics versus convicts. Notre Dame versus Miami, just because of the narrative of it all. I think it's amazing, and I hope they play more games, especially if, Notre Dame decides that they like ACC life and decide to join the conference. And then number 1, I got to give it to Army versus Navy, just because of the history behind it, the game itself, and, this is the one rival game that we take that one team plays their rival game and nobody else is playing at all. We take a week just for that, so that's why they have to be number 1.
Yeah, it's also the only game that I think will never not be a rivalry and never not be played because it's Army-Navy. But no, your list, it's a mixture between me and Brady's, so
pretty much.
I have to. It's a good list.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I love Army Navy. My dad's dad was in the Coast Guard, so when we would watch it, we would root for Navy, right? But then Coast Guard? Not Coast Guard. No, they play D3 football.
They do though. It's great.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Or NAIA, something like that. Yeah, they have.
I thought you were fucking with me.
No.
Coast Guard has its own academy, but it's it's really hard to get into. You either have to have somebody from the Coast Guard write you a letter saying they're good, or have a senator or somebody write you a letter of recommendation to go to the Coast Guard.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's hard.
Coast Guard.
And then, my grandfather, me and Skylar's grandfather, was in the 101st Airborne, so that's leans slightly more to Army. So it was always a mixed bag. I love the pageantry around it. Despite the dipshit we have, I love that the president shows up. I love that it's full of cadets. I love that stuff.
Those guys go fucking crazy at those games. And
they go crazy. I love that it's held in Philadelphia. It's great. But for me, it ultimately just kind of came down to does it matter in the context of the college football world? So
not really.
But no, I love it. I think this was a fun topic. So Mitch picked this topic, which means Skylar picks this next topic. And Skylar, what's on our next what's list?
Top 5 championship games in your life. So whether it's Super Bowls, NCAA championship Final Fours, college football championships. You can either do NBA and MLB series. Just top 5 that you've witnessed. It's just purely subjective. What your favorite championship games have been
Okay.
in the last 5 and as long as you've been alive. So
Man.
top 5. And it can be conference championship games if you want to also. So it can be Big Ten championship games. It can be tournament championships. Just somebody has to win a trophy at the end of it.
That's gonna be
Not trophy games because that's different. Championship games.
That's going to be difficult because there's a bunch of them that I mean, obviously Super Bowl 45, Super Bowl 43, man, Steelers Cardinals. Was still one of my favorite games I've ever watched. Super Bowl 49, Patriots versus Seahawks. The first Big Ten championship game, man, Michigan State versus Wisconsin.
No, it's gonna be rough. But if we need to, we can go to top. If we need to, we can go to top 10.
Yeah, I think top 5 and a couple honorable mentions. I think is pretty.
Yeah,
good.
that should
and
be
you
good.
know what? And you know what? If it's even a high school championship game that you went to and you watched and you absolutely loved it, put it on there. I don't care.
Dude, we went to
Championship game.
Waukesha South. We don't know what that's like.
I went to Lincoln East. I don't.
Yeah, I
either.
mean, our quarterback took 3 steps into the end zone to beat North, but the ref called him down. So whatever. Fuck you, refs. The one time I hated that game. I hated that game. Okay, because me and 3 other guys were body paint. We went and got body paint for ourselves. It was televised. It was great. North hadn't won a game. Comes down to the final play. Cannon Cooley takes 3 steps into the end zone, and the referee called him down on 4th and goal. And it was fucking ridiculous. But whatever. It's fine. I still have it recorded on my dad's TV. When I get really sad, I look at it. So, but hey, I got some.
Olive broke that.
No, it's recorded on like his Direct TV or whatever. So it's
DirecTV. You just said
Yeah.
TV. So I was like, pretty sure Olive destroyed that.
No, I'm gonna play that like at my funeral and I'm gonna have Coach Roosh put me down at my fucking funeral. Just be like, you let me down one more time. So now let's move on to the main caveat of today's episode, and that is the reigning NFC conference champions, the San Francisco.
Packers.
The San Francisco 49ers. Now the 49ers had a great season. They went from 2-14 to 13-3.
Yes.
An 11-game turnaround. They lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. They won. They were 13-3, won the NFC West. Beat Minnesota and Green Bay in the playoffs. Lost 31-20 in the Super Bowl. Jimmy Garoppolo, 3,978 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Their leading receiver was Raheem Mostert, leading rusher Raheem Mostert, 722 yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. And the leading receiver, George Kittle, who signed his big extension, 85 receptions, 1,053 yards, 5 touchdowns. Before we even move into their offseason trades and acquisitions here, what do you guys make of this? I mean, what a turnaround for the 49ers. I mean, what a job for John Lynch. I mean, this team did some great things last season.
Yeah, I mean, John Lynch deserves major props. I mean, when it was announced he would be the GM at the time, I think people kind of wrote it off just because he had been an announcer for years, and him coming to be a GM of a football organization where he has like no experience except for playing. And look what he's done with this team. He deserves major props. Kyle Shanahan, I would think, in my opinion, has done a better job than what Jim Harbaugh did for the 49ers.
Yeah.
In my opinion, just because of stability and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's an amazing turnaround for the 49ers. And, I think NFL football is always good when the San Francisco 49ers are playing this well.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, I don't think anybody could have called John Lynch honestly, executive of the next 7 years. What he's done with this team, what he continues to do with this team, he's just made. It reminds me of, honestly, like a Bill Belichick. He's been playing chess while the rest of the league's been playing checkers, taking advantage of other people that wrote him off. He's done really well. I mean, this is if they keep playing like this, they're a perennial Super Bowl contender. And the best part is their team's relatively young, and even the parts of them that were old, they've started replacing. I mean, I mean, I can name some old guys on both offense and defense, but I mean, like they're star players on both sides. They're young players. So this is a team that has a lot of wins ahead in their future.
Yeah, I think perennial for the next 2 seasons. And then after that, they're going to begin to run into some massive contract issues. I mean, with
Yeah.
everybody on that defensive line, guys like Fred Warner, guys like Nick Bosa, Richard Sherman, Jimmy Garoppolo, George Kittle. Now he's lined up for the next couple of seasons. The offensive line as well. You're going to get some of those younger guys who are going to need better contracts or bigger contracts. Raheem Mostert, who was going to hold out, and then they reworked his contract, which means they're going to have to get him into a new contract. So I think this team is set up for success, but this team, their strength in being young is also going to be their weakness for a long time.
True.
Because you're going to run into these massive contract issues. So let's move into free agent losses and acquisitions. Not a ton of free agent losses, actually. Not an absolute ton. I mean, some guys we talked about, Anthony Zettel, the defensive end, went to Minnesota. They lost outside linebacker Elijah Lee to Detroit. They lost defensive tackle Sheldon Day to Indianapolis. Tight end Levine Toilolo to the Giants. But the big one, guy they traded for, Emmanuel Sanders, went to New Orleans. And then some free agent acquisitions, pretty much everybody. I mean, the trade for Trent Williams from Washington. They lost Joe Staley, but immediately replaced him with Trent Williams. They pick up guard Tom Compton from the Jets. They pick up defensive end Kerry Hyder from Dallas. They pick up wide receiver Travis Benjamin from the Chargers. They pick up inside linebacker Joe Walker from the Cardinals. Tavon Austin goes from Dallas to San Francisco. And then they pick up tight end Jordan Reed from Washington and former first-round pick Deion Jordan from the Raiders defensive end. So what do you guys make of their free agent losses and acquisitions?
They lost a couple guys, but I think those positions have been replaced. DeForest Buckner's now in Indy, but they got a draft pick in him. We'll talk about it a little more. Sanders and Marquise Goodwin have left, but I think they're pretty set at wide receiver right now. And then Matt Breida left for the Dolphins, but their stable's pretty great now, especially with Morstead coming back. So I don't think they lost that much. And with their games, I don't think there's any besides Trent Williams. I don't think there's like a game changer. It's more like depth pieces that are going to keep them, competitive and consistent, which I like. So I think it's a all around.
Yeah, I'll go B plus because I'm still some of these players that they got. I mean, besides Trent Williams, there's either some injury issues with some of them or there's not playing to full potential kind of that we're looking at. But I am interested to see where like Tavon Austin, Travis Benjamin, and Jordan Reed, some more weapons that they added on that offense are able to do with his team because I think that they have the potential. Like Tavon Austin was when he was good with Dallas. Travis Benjamin, we saw what he could do in college, but never really lived up, in my opinion, to the hype in Los Angeles, outshined by some better wide receivers, honestly. So I don't know. I still think their wide receivers is the weakest part of this offense right now because it has some unprovenness to it. And I mean, Deebo Samuel, while good, had some key drops in some of those games. But no, I'll give it a B plus because I mean, for what they lost, they gained players that can fill those spots. So B plus.
Yeah, I'll give it about a B plus as well. A lot of people were like, well, why didn't they really go out and sign like a number one wide receiver? And I think the point is that they don't need one. They have George Kittle, and they added Jordan Reed on there now. Jordan Reed can stay healthy and avoid concussions. He's an absolutely dominant
tight end.
And then Deebo.
And they have Deebo. Deebo is still young, and then the guy that they drafted we'll talk about here as well. This is a team that can easily run a 2 tight end fullback set with one, maybe 2 wide receivers and be absolutely dominant. And I think that's what's going to be key here.
Yeah, don't count out Juszczyk
for this team.
Never count out Juszczyk.
No, you really can't. I mean, he's there's not many fullbacks in the NFL, and he's probably the best one all around.
No, and I was gonna say, well, and I mean, people said the same thing the year before about the defensive back situation. They're like, Niners need to pick up some defensive backs because Richard Sherman's getting old. He had the worst season he had ever had. Mm-hmm. And then they came out this next season and balled out. Yeah. So when it comes to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, I'll trust them on their personnel decisions. I feel like they know their team better than anybody else does. So
Yeah, and I can't think of his name. Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator they have, is a stud. I love that guy.
He deserves a head coaching job. He
absolutely does. So that's the question mark with the San Francisco team is, hey, we've seen Kyle Shanahan choke and then not do much afterwards. So what is he going to be able to do now that they've choked in the playoff and in the Super Bowl? Because remember, that team was up 20-10 in the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter and gave up 21 unanswered points to hand the Chiefs that Super Bowl. So
George, did you see what George Kittle said at the end of that game, though?
No.
He was mic'd up for the Super Bowl, and like when it became official, like the last 2 minutes, nothing really that they could it wasn't gonna
do to win the game.
Do to win the game. George Kittle was like, "I'm coming back. Nobody's stopping me from coming back. I'm getting back here." And I just sat there. I was going.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good San Francisco team. It's can they do it consistently? That's the major question. So then with the draft, they only had 5 draft picks, 2 first-round picks, though they traded back into the first round with Minnesota. At number 14 overall, the pick they got for DeForest Buckner from Indianapolis. They went with defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina. They moved up into the first round at pick number 25 to pick up Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver from Arizona State. Which means Arizona State has now produced back-to-back first-round wide receiver picks, including N'Keal Harry, who went to New England last year. In the 5th round, they went Colton McKivitz, offensive tackle from West Virginia. 6th round, they went Charlie Warner, tight end from Georgia. And in the 7th round, they picked up Juwan Jennings, wide receiver from Tennessee. So very limited draft pick pool, but this was a team that didn't have many free agent losses, didn't have a ton of free agent gains. So how do you guys grade their draft?
I think they had a pretty good draft. I mean, you got to start with their first pick, Javon Kinlaw. Me and you, Brady, were very high on him. We thought he was better than what's his name? The defensive tackle who went before him.
Oh, Derek Brown.
Yeah, we thought he was a better, well-rounded defensive tackle more than Derek Brown. I think, they got a plug-and-play player for DeForest Buckner, which is awesome. Brandon Ayuk, he just builds up that wide receiver core with, Dante Pez, Jalen Hurd, and Deebo Samuel, so that's awesome. Colton McKivitz, that gives you depth on that offensive line, which they desperately needed. And Juwan Jennings is more depth for the wide receiver core, so I'll give it a B+, and the only thing keeping it from an A is just the lack of picks.
Yeah, I kind of went the same way. It's like B+, because they did relatively well with what they picked up. I mean, Kinlaw is going to strengthen an already just great defensive line. Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings are good wide receivers Brandon Ayuk obviously is a little bit better. And from whatever, he was better than N'Keal Harry too at Arizona State. Shows a little bit more consistency with his play. We're still waiting for N'Keal Harry to kind of show up in New England. But again, it's there. Like I said before, the wide receiver playmaking, wide receiver is probably their weakest position on a really good offense, and they addressed it 10 times in free agency and in the draft, and then getting some more depth on that offensive line because they had to deal with Joe Thomas.
Joe Staley left, but they immediately replaced him with Trent Williams.
Yeah, but having somebody on that offensive line that like a young guy that can learn behind some of those really good offensive linemen helps too. So yeah, I have to give it a B. Pretty good.
Yeah, I give it a B+ also. I like the Javon Kinlaw pick. Nick Bosa said he was the largest man he's ever seen in his life.
That's coming from Nick Bosa.
It's coming from Nick Bosa. I can't go higher because I'm not sold on some of the picks. I like Brandon Ayuk a lot, but I don't know how they're going to utilize him out in San Francisco. Anytime you draft an offensive lineman, I'm going to give it a good grade because it's depth. I love the Juwan Jennings pick, though. I absolutely love this kid. Not a lot of people watch Tennessee football. I got to catch a couple of games. Tennessee, towards the end of that season, was really coming on strong with some quarterback issues, and Juwan Jennings was really good. So I'm going to give it probably a B, just because not a whole lot of picks, but there wasn't a whole lot of need for this team. What I like about the Niners is that they're going to this mindset of, we're going to stop you from running the ball against us. And if you look at the teams in the NFC who could contend against them, right? New Orleans, Green Bay, Seattle, Minnesota, All of those teams really want to run the ball. New Orleans, not so much, but they still have the ability to with Kamara. So they're going to say, you can't run the ball against us, so we're going to make Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins and Drew Brees beat our defense. Yeah. And from what we saw last season, they couldn't consistently do it, beat the Niners. So I like where it's at. So then where do we grade this team? In or in need of a rebuild, in or in need of a reload, playoff, or 8-8 tier, playoff tier, or Super Bowl caliber tier team? They should be pretty easy. For me, it's Super Bowl caliber, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Super Bowl caliber team. I think from the top down, they're, all there. The only two concerns I have with this team is who their quarterback is and Jimmy G, because I don't think he's Super Bowl caliber kind of guy who's going to win you multiple rings like a Tom Brady, a Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Montana, so on and so forth. Because he basically just handed the ball off and was like a Wisconsin quarterback through this playoff series. And when it came down to him needing to make the big play, he couldn't make the big play. So it's going to come down to, Shanahan and Lynch deciding if Jimmy G is really our franchise guy, or do we maybe need to go find somebody else who can actually throw the fucking football. And then it's got to be the secondary. I mean, Richard Sherman's really your only corner, but he's in his mid-30s, and we saw last year and in the playoffs, he got burnt pretty bad by people he should not have got burnt by. And the safety position's kind of average, and there's really no other corner. So I think that's really holding back this defense from being potentially being like an all-time great defense. So those are my only two concerns, but everything else is keeping them in Super Bowl caliber, especially at the defensive line and George Kittle.
This is a Super Bowl caliber team. They've shown that they're the best of the NFC. Not just like the only team that really gave them a run for their money, and I really wish that they had made the NFC Championship game because it would have been a great rematch, was New Orleans. Every other NFC contender they thumped. Honestly, they. I mean, no offense to Green Bay, but that NFC
they thumped them. Yeah, they thumped.
No, the NFC Championship game was a joke. But again, it's like I disagree on Jimmy G. I'll say he's nowhere near where he needs to be for this team to be contending every year. But right now, he doesn't need to be. I will say he needs to take a step up in order to win a ring. I'll agree with you on that. He does, because if you look at the tape from him at the very beginning of the year. It was trash. He was throwing multiple interceptions a game. He wasn't making the right reads, wasn't playing right. But I also think that he's the best quarterback for them at this point. I relate it really close to Tom Brady's first years in New England, where you have a really good defense, a great running game, and a quarterback that's still trying to find themselves. The only difference is that Tom Brady has more of a killer instinct when it comes to football than Jimmy G does. And I think that it's something Jimmy G can develop when he needs to play more football. That's where I'm putting it. Jimmy G needs to play more football at this point. Because after he got traded, they won 5 games in a row. They went 1-1 this season that he got injured. Was that right? Like 1-1?
Something like that.
1-2. But those games were close, and that team was 4-12, 2-14 after he went out. And then he comes back and they're a Super Bowl team. Jimmy G gives this team the best chance to make the Super Bowl. I agree, though. He has work. He has work to do. He's not a finished product at all. But I have to trust John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan at this point in working with him and making him better. Because again, the best year Matty Ice ever had was with Kyle Shanahan as his OC. Yeah, they didn't win a Super Bowl, but what has Matty Ice done since then? He's done pretty well, but not nearly.
But yeah, as a team, they haven't succeeded.
So again, I think it's inexperience at the head coaching and the quarterback position that's really holding back this team. But as they play more football, they'll get better.
So here's my thing with Kyle Shanahan, and you can clearly see it from his time in Washington to his time in Atlanta to his time now in San Francisco, is that every time he has put his faith into the quarterback has failed him.
True. With
the exception of that game against New England in the Super Bowl, because that was Shanahan's fault that strip sack happened. That play should have never been called, ever been called. All right. And now, granted, it was Dante Freeman's fault for missing the block on Hightower, but that play should have never been called. There was no outlet receiver. It was a bad play that was called. But you saw it in Washington, right? Trusted his quarterback. RG3 gets hurt. Then they have to trust Kirk Cousins. He can't do it consistently. People forget Jimmy Garoppolo had a really untimely interception in the Super Bowl that gave Kansas City their opportunity to get right back into that game. And I think that the more that Shanahan is going to realize I can win games by running the ball, the more he's going to run the ball, the less he's going to trust Jimmy Garoppolo. And so then when it comes to a moment where he has to trust Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't trust that Garoppolo can actually get it done. And that's going to be the thing that's going to hold back this team. It's almost like the polar opposite of New Orleans, right? Where New Orleans trusts Drew Brees so much they think he can do anything that it doesn't really matter the other pieces they put around him. Yeah. They're just going to invest on making it easier for Drew Brees. And I think that San Francisco is the other way around. They so don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo that they're going to invest in everything around him to try to make his job as easiest as possible. But then that comes into a matter of fact of if Jimmy Garoppolo is only throwing 10 passes a game like he did against Green Bay, how are you expected to develop guys like Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and stuff like that? And then this team to me just feels one injury away from being 6-10, whether it's Bosa or whether it's Garoppolo or it's Sherman or whatever it might be. Kittle. Their defensive line is solid enough to win them a bunch of games. Their offensive line is solid enough, their running game. But when push comes to shove to win games against Seattle or against New Orleans, can the quarterback play be strong enough to do so? And I think Garoppolo can get there. I just haven't seen it consistently from him.
Which is true because, I mean, that game against New Orleans was one of the best games he had in his career. Yeah. And that's not a bad defense in New Orleans either. It's not the best defense that they've ever had, but it's not a bad defense in New Orleans either. So, like, what I'm saying is that I'm not immediately going to write off Jimmy G and say that he's not capable of doing it because he has shown in games he can. But there's also in times like against Kansas City, like, again, I said at the beginning of the season, against Cincinnati, even though that was a blowout, there were some passes he threw he should not have thrown.
You're right.
Who was the team they played before that? Like week 1, there were some really bad throws and they barely won that.
I think they played Cincy week 1, something like that.
No, that was Seattle. Seattle played Cincy.
I don't remember who they played week 1. But then like the way that I look at it is like a really telltale sign is that game against Baltimore. Now, granted, it was in the pouring rain, right? But Garoppolo did not play strong in that game. In the game against Atlanta that they lost, Garoppolo did not play strong in that game. Even the playoff games against Green Bay and against Minnesota, he didn't play strong. Granted, he didn't need to. And it's not a knock on him that the rest of his team is so good that he doesn't need to. But what I worry about is that when push comes to shove, when they play teams like Seattle again, when they play teams like Green Bay again, if it comes down to a quarterback battle, that's where Jimmy G is going to suffer, and that's where this team might suffer. So let's move on to our season predictions. We've talked about the Niners a bunch. They have a little bit of a cakewalk schedule here. They play the NFC East and the AFC East. I have this team going 14-2. I have them probably splitting the series against Seattle, and I think I have them losing to New Orleans, but that's really it. This team is strong enough to be my number 1 seed. I have them going 14-2.
I had a similar thought, but I went one up on you. I have them going 15-1. I have them splitting the series with Seattle. When you just look at the schedule, it's kind of a cakewalk, to be honest. I mean, let's look at the big teams that they have to play. They have to play the Patriots, but they're not the Patriots. They just got Cam Newton, so we don't know how that's all going to integrate. The Packers, their run defense still has questions, so. And
they get the Packers at home on a Thursday game. So Green Bay has to fly out to San Francisco on a shortened schedule.
Then they got the Saints. Drew Brees isn't getting any younger, and their defense isn't otherworldly. The Bills, Josh Allen is holding the team back from being great. And then the Cowboys are the Cowboys. So, with the schedule like that, and they could go 16-0, but just with the kind of rivalry they have the Seahawks, I think Seattle gets one from them, and that's why they're 15-1.
See, I'm going to go one less than Brady. I'm going to go 13-3. I think they'll tie the record from last year. I have them losing a trap game against Miami. I just think
that's right. You did.
Wow.
I forgot about that.
Because, again, there are times where San Francisco plays down to opponents, and that can be troublesome for them.
What's the scenario look like? Set it up for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
the upside.
All right. Okay. So Miami comes in. They haven't really done much this season.
Mhm.
They're trying to prove. Okay.
There's a strong wind coming from the northeast.
Yeah.
It's a balmy day.
It's in. I think it's in Miami too.
Yeah,
Give me a
it
second.
is.
It's in
It is.
Miami.
You
Okay.
can hear the dolphins
You can.
from the ocean.
Everybody's waiting for Tua to come out. Everybody's waiting for Tua to come out. They announce. Brian Flores announces that Tua's going to be starting the game. Tua comes out. He's in there. The first play, he throws an interception. It's returned for a touchdown. Everybody's like, fuck. Damn it. And then Tua shows us what he couldn't do at Alabama, and that's win a game against a big-time opponent because he couldn't do that at Bama. He only did it once, and that's when he came in as a backup. Other than that, he never really did it. He never won a ring by himself. So I'm going to say that if Tua starts this game, which I think he probably will at some point, or even Fitzmagic can pull some shit out of it. Miami won 5 games. They had no reason winning last year. Okay? So I'm just saying, this team's better than last year. We have all agreed. So I'm just going to say it's a trap game for San Francisco. They're going to be caught sleeping. Devontae Parker puts up 150 yards on Richard Sherman. Mosses him.
Tua's going to look over in the left corner. He's going to see Parker's got a half step on Sherman. He's going to whip out the lefty in the corner. It's going to come over, caught. Sherman's going to cry himself to sleep.
The catch 3.
Miami
Parker's
wins.
going to win MVP.
Miami wins by, I'm going to go 3. They're going to win
35.
by 3. No, 3. They're going to win by 3. It's going to be a close game. They reevaluate their entire season. They can't lose to a team like Miami again, and then next week they lose to Los Angeles.
Ooh. All right. Well, that's interesting.
But because they split this, I've been splitting the series with both the Rams and Seattle because the Rams defensive line I just think is really good. And I think they can play well at home in that new stadium. That's not for another year, is it?
No, I think they play this season in the new stadium. It's pretty much completed.
The stadium's done.
Yeah, and then I agree with both of you guys. Seattle's just their games are way too close all the time, so I have them splitting the series there, but I have them beating Green Bay, I have them beating New Orleans, I have them beating Dallas because they're the best of the NFC until they prove me otherwise.
Yeah.
Until they prove otherwise, they're the best of the NFC because they're built to beat NFC teams. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So then that'll wrap up today's episode here before we get to the putts and the hero. The next episodes we have Seattle, Tampa, Tennessee, and Washington to close it out. So let's get to our what a putts and our hero of the episode. My putts goes to Mr. Kanye West in conjunction with Derrick Rose. Now I sent it to Mitch. I'm going to have him tweet it out. I don't know if you guys have seen the shoe that they have created, but it literally looks like if you took a condom and then you cut it like you would a fillet, and then you put it on your feet. It's terrible. It's all white. It looks like fish. It's awful to look at. I can't believe that anybody thought this was a good idea. And these shoes are probably going to sell for $1,800 a pair. It's ridiculous. Kanye's already a terrible person. I thought Derrick Rose was better than this, but I guess he's not. This shoe was signed off on. It's so ugly to look at. We'll have Mitch tweet it out, and you guys take a look at it. Just let us know how ugly you think it is, because it is god-awful.
Yeah, it looks like a rotting fish carcass you put on your feet. It's pretty bad.
It really does. It looks like soap scum that you would like pull out of your drain in your shower, and then you just put that on your feet. Like, it's terrible.
Yeah, and to go off track a little bit, Kanye West was rating emojis last night on Twitter. It was pretty entertaining. All right, so let's go to my putts. So I have 2 puttses just because there's a lot of putsiness this week. Let's see. Where's the first one? Second. All right, so the first one, I have to give it to Paul George and Patrick Beverley because ever since they dogged Dame Lillard and tried to say, oh, we're better than him, he just went off and, balled out. So before the epic game against the Nets where they got into the playoffs, Patrick Beverley in the 2 games before then was averaging 56 points per game, 7.5 assists, 55 from the field, 45 for 3, 97 from the free throw line, 40 points in the fourth quarter combined, and then a 2-0 record. So,
you mean Dame Lillard? You said Pat Beverley was averaging.
Oh, sorry, Dame Lillard. So they obviously didn't know it was Dame time, so Putsy, it's Paul George and Beverly. And then my number one, obviously, has to be former Seahawks rookie cornerback Kamei Silverhand for trying to sneak in a girl into the team hotel by dressing her up and disguising her as a Seahawks player. That obviously did not fucking work. He got found out immediately, and he's no longer on an NFL team. So my dude was a little thirsty for some WAP, so he's a putz.
That story was so funny when it came out. And then the memes where it was like pictures of like, because like Ariana Grande or Selena Gomez have gone to Seahawks games, and they're like, and they would like take a photo of them, and she'd be like, "No, I play corner for the Seahawks." Like, oh, it was so funny. He's such an idiot. Like, how are you that dumb?
Proud education system that is Oklahoma State.
Jesus Christ! All right. So, Skylar, we're ready for your tangent here on your putts. I have you muted, so just let me know whenever you're ready.
Okay. My putts are Michael Wilbon, Desmond Howard, and by extension the Big Ten. I went off on a rant with these two in our group chat.
I had to break you guys up. You guys were at each other's throats.
The disrespect. Okay. I understand. I totally agree with him on the fact that the Big Ten made the right decision in canceling fall football. I agree with that on the side. But saying that Nebraska needs to be kicked out of the Big Ten because we dared defy the almighty commissioner and say that we wanted to play football. And we're saying we're looking into our options. This isn't Jim Delaney's Big Ten anymore. Jim Delaney ruled the Big Ten with an iron fist. He got what he wanted, and nobody said anything about it. Jim Delaney's not the commissioner anymore. Okay? Also, the fact that the next day, Ryan Day says the exact same thing, and these two guys say nothing. The hypocrisy is disgusting. Nebraska is not treated as an equal part of the Big Ten because they don't view us as a Big Ten football team. They don't view us as a Big Ten team in general. Since Nebraska has been in the Big Ten, we've gone to football championships. We've gone to basketball championships. We've made the NCAA tournament twice, which we had never done once before. We have won volleyball championships. We have won Big Ten championships in baseball. We have won Big Ten championships in track and field. We have contributed to the Big Ten. We also did our damnedest to make sure that our team was ready to play football come the fall. And I feel like we actually had one of the lowest percentages of positive football cases for COVID.
You did.
When you have Kirk Ferentz running the Iowa team and the Big Ten stays silent and says nothing, when you have Urban Meyer doing what he did and Ohio State gets off scot-free, it's disgusting.
I mean, when you have Penn State who did
When you have Penn State do what the fuck they did and nothing happens?
Well, and they got off of their sanctions early because of good behavior.
This is disgusting. As a Nebraska fan, I'm very upset. Yeah, I get it. Nebraska football hasn't been relevant. I get it. Okay, but we're at tough out in the West. We're always in it when it comes to November. And if we're not, we're making sure we help decide who does go to the Big Ten championship and represents the West. Okay? So I'm tired. I'm very, very tired of the disrespect that Nebraska gets from the Big Ten. You look at promotional things, Nebraska's barely even mentioned. It's getting tiring. And I understand you shouldn't be taking this. It's not, I get that it's not supposed to be just about Nebraska, but the disrespect, no other team in the Big Ten is treated like this. We got here before Rutgers and Maryland, and they are treated as more of a part of the Big Ten than we are. We have done better in terms of showing what Big Ten football should be, what a Big Ten school should represent than Ohio State and Penn State and Iowa. It's disgusting at this point. And the fact that these two guys, who are from two teams that haven't really done anything in the Big Ten recently, decide that Nebraska needs to be kicked out and then say nothing about Ohio State the next day. Or it just came out that Iowa's football family said it's very upsetting that they aren't playing football. Should Iowa be kicked out now? No. I get it. Scott Frost is a little vocal. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
He's defending his players. That's what he should be doing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you're completely right, and I'm on board with you. And Mitch plays devil's advocate.
What do you mean?
But
Just bring out the rationale.
no, I understand it, but
There's a difference between we're gonna play anywhere and everywhere, and it doesn't matter if we leave the conference. Then compared to Ryan Day saying it's a fluid situation, we'll look at our options, and the Gene Smith's already saying it's
but
not
see-
going to happen. So
But
there's
see,
a
the
difference.
thing is that
It's
Nebraska
apples and oranges.
No, it's not, because Nebraska never said we're going to leave the Big Ten permanently, but the reaction was you should leave the Big Ten permanently. If Ohio State or Penn State or whoever decides that they want to go play ACC football for a year, no one's going to bat an eye. The hypocrisy of it maybe wasn't in the statement, but it was the fact that Nebraska had calls from the rest of the Big Ten that, hey, you need to shut up and you need to play, you need to go with the system. But meanwhile, Ohio State does the same thing. Purdue looked at options. Penn State looked at options. Michigan looked at options. And nothing.
Nebraska was the only one who said that they were doing it.
Yeah, and nothing was said. I think that at its core is what Skyler is upset about, is the hypocrisy of it. Now, I understand both sides. I understand that Nebraska is part of the Big Ten and should follow what the Big Ten says. But I also understand that Nebraska was the program that brought kids in the earliest, that made sure that kids who were exposed were quarantined, that made sure that tests were given to everybody. And teams like Northwestern and Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and Wisconsin, I got the hiccups, so that sucks, all didn't do that. And so Nebraska should be able to look at those options, because Nebraska was the biggest, that was so instrumental in making sure that their players were healthy and made sure that the resources were there if they weren't healthy. I understand both sides. We can all agree that there's at its core hypocrisy here, that Nebraska gets an earful, but the other perennial Big Ten teams necessarily don't. But I also understand what Mitch is saying, which is that Nebraska was new kid on the block in terms. Yeah, granted, other teams have joined, but new kid on the block in a big get, and now they're already unhappy with the Big Ten. I don't think they're unhappy with the Big Ten. I think they're unhappy nationally with the way that the COVID situation has been handled, and the fact that they've handled it well and nothing's been said. But like Skyler said, Iowa has massive allegations come against them, and the Big Ten is mum. Ohio State didn't really do anything to Urban Meyer when that stuff came out. They let Penn State off scot-free. None of those teams have run the risk of being kicked out of the Big Ten, and yet a lot of fans and a lot of coaches and a lot of members of the Big Ten have said Nebraska should be kicked out for this. So I agree with it on both sides.
I totally agree at that point when Skyler's saying, serious issues have come up from other schools and people have been mum. But with this situation, people are vocal about it. I totally get that. The only part is just what Ryan Day said and what Scott Frost said. That's the only thing where I come with this. Otherwise, I'm in totally agree with you, Skyler. We're everything you just said.
No, I get it. It's Scott Frost saying we're looking at what our options are. Not saying it wasn't we're leaving the Big Ten. It wasn't we're going to go play football this fall. It's we're looking at what our options are, and we don't care who we play or where we play. That's what he said. And Ryan Day said it's a fluid situation. And like Brady said, every team in the Big Ten was looking at what their options were. Nebraska was just the only team that said.
Yeah, and I mean the SEC
I think it's the when and where. Really,
it's the when. It's the when and where. But Nebraska.
The SEC and the ACC have both made overtures to teams like Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan to come join them this year. Like, they've been actively pursued by other conferences and have responded, and the Big Ten hasn't done anything about it. So completely understandable here, but let's move on to our hero. So our hero is the exact opposite of our What a Putt segment, where we break down a person, a team, a player, whatever it might be that did something nice. My hero goes to Josh McCown because a story came out from his time on the Jets where McCown was hurt for 2 games and a guy by the name of Tom Kafka was signed onto the active roster. Now, in order to reach the NFL pension, you need to be signed onto an active roster for 3 games for 3 seasons. Kafka had been on an active roster for 3 games for 2 seasons. By the time the 3rd week came around with the Jets, so by the time the week was that he would have reached that pension ability, Josh McCown was healthy to play. And the coach, Todd Bowles, called Josh McCown and said, hey, are you good? Can you play? And McCown said, I'm good, but I'm not going to play because this means more to Tom Kafka. And so it was a meaningless game. The Jets were already out of playoff contention. There was nothing they could have done. So he sat a game out to allow Kafka to reach the limit for the NFL pension so that Kafka is taken care of financially. He came back the week after. Kafka was put on the practice squad, and it's been mum since. I thought that was a really cool story because Josh McCown is an ultimate competitor. He's the ultimate journeyman. He's made a lot of money in his career. And yet he took a step back so that a guy who maybe didn't have the opportunities given to him could reach this stability that a lot of players who join the NFL hope for. And I thought that was a really cool story. So I'm going to give my hat off to Josh McCown. It was an awesome story. It was really cool to read and to listen to. And I've always thought Josh McCown was a fantastic human being, and this just really solidified it. So I give my hat to him for doing the selfless thing and taking care of another player.
Yeah, I definitely think incoming NFL players should definitely aspire to be like Josh McCown. I mean, I know it's kind of would be cool to be like Odell Beckham, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, that kind of stuff. But like for the guys who are mostly going to be like not that level for the majority of their career, they should definitely aspire to be like that.
Yeah.
So for my hero, I have an honorable mention, and that has to go to Greg Popovich. For during his like basically end of the season news conference or whatever, he talked about the playoff streak, and this is his exact quote. That's fake news. That's total fake news. Lots of guys have been telling me the streak hasn't ended. I talk to people all the time. They call me. They tell me, Pop, the streak didn't end. It didn't end. So I'll let you guys figure out who that impersonation was. That's just classic Popovich. I love him for it. That's why, to me, even though Phil Jackson won like all the rings, Pop is the GOAT. But for my hero, it's kind of similar along the lines of what you did, Brady. It has to go to Travis Kelce, the guy who just got a big paid raise. And the first thing he did that with that money was use it to buy a building for inner center teenagers to study STEM stuff. So, major props to Travis Kelce using this
STEM, like, what is it, science, technology?
Yeah, science.
Okay.
Yeah,
Engineering,
randomly.
math.
I thought you meant stem cells, and I'm like,
No.
I don't know if I was so okay. No, but that's awesome.
No, but yeah, major props for Travis Kelce to share the wealth and use it for the betterment of people, especially.
In KC.
Yeah.
Breaking news: the Pelicans have fired Alvin Gentry.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Just announced right now by Waj, the Pelicans have fired Alvin Gentry.
Well,
So,
I know where Ty Lue's going.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So, Skyler, your hero.
My hero goes to Karis LeVert. And it really comes. The guy has been written off, honestly. He's on a team now with KD and Kyrie, and Dinwiddie, or not Dinwiddie.
Spencer Dinwiddie. Yeah.
Dinwiddie, and was written off as not going to be the best player on, like not even almost a contributing player on this team. That guy is the reason the Nets are as good as they are right now. To see him ball out with a sore, again, like I said at the beginning of this episode, with a sore leg, and go pound to pound with Dame, in that game, that was amazing for me to watch. And the guy, he was a lottery pick. There were some expectations for him, and then the Nets went in a completely different direction. And he's the reason why I think they can go 6 with Toronto. He's a reason why I think that they're tough out in this team, and this in the playoffs. He's finally getting some of the recognition he deserves as a certified top scorer in the NFL or NBA. God, can't talk today. So Karis LeVert, thanks for staying humble and putting your head down, nose to the floor. Just keep on grinding. And when Kyrie and KD get healthy, this Nets team's going to be a tough team.
Yeah, definitely. So with that, we appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening. We've got a great couple episodes coming up here. We're going to wrap up the NFL. By the time we do the next episode, the play-in tournament or the play-in will be decided. It may be decided later today. We'll see. NBA playoffs is starting right around here.
Get through the first day of games by the time we get to the next episode.
Yeah.
Correct. So we'll excited. The next episode we have are the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to close out the NFC West. And then after that, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Tennessee Titans, and the Washington football team, which is still so funny to me. To wrap that up, we've got college football starting. We've got NFL training camps happening right now. Guys are getting re-signed. Mason Crosby, who we talked about in a previous episode, was just removed off the COVID list, so he's back on the team right now. So it's going to be great. We're really excited. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. Boys, before I do a quick wrap-up here, is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, just we're finally getting some playoff sports, so I think we should all enjoy it. We all deserve it after the year that we've had, and just enjoy some playoff basketball.
Yeah, I'll just keep harping on it until NFL starts. If you want to do our fantasy football, please email us so that I can send you the link to join the team. These two idiots still haven't yet.
Oh shit, I forgot.
I'll put it back in the group chat. Okay. But yeah, because I always love podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever that interact with the fans, and I think this is a great way for us to do it. And it means you can show that you're better at this whole football thing than probably me.
We'll have the winner of the league will get an honorary T-shirt.
And the loser will have to, if it's one of us three, I feel like has to come on and say that everything they've said to that point is wrong and that they need to listen to the other two. I feel like that we need to do that.
No, I'll just block you two.
I would also like to make a shirt that says Houston is okay, but they're not OKC, because that was great.
And then put the time that Skylar took to think of that one out.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? No, it wasn't for the quote. It was whether or not I was going to use it.
15-second pause. Houston is okay. That was so funny. No, we appreciate everybody.
It's the first show we make.
Email us. You can email us at fourthstringsp@gmail.com, fourthstringsp@gmail.com. You can follow us on everything: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Reddit, the whole 9 yards there. We're very interactive, so follow us on everything. We appreciate all the listeners. Everybody have a fantastic day, a lovely weekend, and we'll be back for episode 31 of the Fourth String Sports podcast.